cordless push-button telephone will mean much more freedom of movement, a superb radio receiver, and of course, television.
In recent years, efficiency and pleasure of our personal lives to the extent that now ordering a cab, booking a flight, buying a product, making a payment, listening to music, watching a film, or playing a game. It also presents unprecedented challenges to the existing regulatory framework in protecting our rights to privacy as well as dignity and autonomy, emerging from uninformed behavioral tracking or profiling, data breach, electronic surveillance and interception, etc. The continuing innovations in information and communication technology, including big data, cloud computing, data analytics, robotics, machine learning, and artificial intelligence have undoubtedly reshaped the world we live in. Emerging ICT developments, notably in areas such as cashless shopping and open banking, invariably bring with them privacy considerations. In the first, second, and third industrial revolutions, privacy was treated as the norm. Personal information belonged clearly to the individual. Anyone else who wanted it had to seek it out by asking or by searching, legitimately or illegitimately. Businesses did market research rather than using algorithms to search customers' data. Authoritarian governments paid informants rather than deploying spyware. Today, because of digitalization, the opposite is true. Personal data is now gathered by default on any activity that's capable of being digitally captured. And as the digital revolution proceeds, that increasingly means almost any activity at all. Certainly for those who live and benefit from highly connected lives, but increasingly too, even for those whose lives are less connected. This fundamentally changes the nature of privacy, and it fundamentally changes the basis for privacy's protection. Withholding data is no longer feasible in the digital society. What matters for protection now is what is done with it, by whom, for how long, with what impact, with what security, and how that is accountable. Old laws based on old assumptions aren't enough for this. New ones are needed that recognize what's happened. What degree of oversight of individuals' data should governments exercise in order to protect individuals' right to privacy? What do individuals think of that, individually and collectively? What protections are required to ensure core principles in data collection in as far as lawfulness, fairness, transparency, and accountability of data collection and use is concerned? We'll be trying to answer these
les victoires de notre libération. Engageons-nous, élevons-nous tous comme excellents pour défendre notre liberté et l'unité. Oh, chers fils et filles de l'Afrique, chers du soleil, chers du ciel, faisons de l'Afrique l'arbre de vie. Mungu twaomba uilinde Jumuiya Afrika Mashariki, tuwezeshe kuishi kwa amani, tutimize na malengo yetu. Jumuiya yetu sote tuilinde, tuajibike, tuimarike. Umoja wetu ni nguzo yetu, idumu jumuiya yetu.
Dear participants, on behalf of Unwanted Witness, I take the pleasure to welcome you all to this third edition of the Privacy Symposium Africa 2021. This year has been a very important year for privacy and data protection in Africa. Over 24 African countries have adopted data protection laws with instituted enforcement mechanisms. This is a big step towards the protection and recognition of the right to privacy on the continent. It is therefore important for all of us to walk the talk as far as protecting the African people against pervasive technological power and control is concerned. Bringing together a diverse blend of stakeholders, disciplines and approaches, the Privacy Symposium has proven over the years to be the ideal platform to discuss matters safeguarding personal data, our dignity and lives, as well as shaping policy and practices. Ladies and gentlemen, for 3 days, the symposium will provide insightful talks and engaging discussions throughout the African continent and beyond. Unwanted Witness is looking forward to some lively discussions, to meeting old friends, and making a lot new ones. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, you are most welcome. Thank you.
so much. A wonderful band, and that's the Titanic Band, who are the resident band here today. African Queen, that was a special dedication to all the African queens who are on this call, and I hope you enjoyed that one. Now, without further ado, we're just about ready to hear our first speech for the day, which is the keynote address. And this keynote address is going to be given by someone who is absolutely equal to the task. And she's from all the way from right here, the Pearl of Africa in Uganda. Miss Stella Alibateese is going to be giving us a keynote, and it is on data policies, law and regulations, creating a trust environment in Africa. All right, and Stella is the National Personal Data Protection Director in the Personal Data Protection Office. And this is an office that was established by Uganda to be responsible for personal data protection in Uganda. If I'm to read you her CV, I can do that until the cows come home, but her CV is also available for all of you to be able to go through. But I have absolutely no doubt that Stella is absolutely equal to the task. And now over to you, Stella, to give us that keynote address. We'll be right back.
Distinguished guests, Data Protection Commissioners present, ladies and gentlemen. I take this opportunity to welcome you to Uganda, our Pearl of Africa, and a special welcome to those who have joined us virtually at the 3rd Privacy Symposium Africa, hosted by Unwanted Witness and its various partners under the theme Data Protection, a New Dawn in Africa. Indeed, it is a new dawn for Africa in respect of data protection. Particularly within East Africa, many of us are just starting implementation of our data protection and privacy laws. In Uganda, in Kenya, and in Rwanda, data protection offices or commissions have been set up to ensure compliance with this important legislation. Other countries within the region are still at drafting stage, but I'm sure are following the rest of us closely. For us in particular, Uganda passed its data protection and privacy law in 2019 and gazetted regulations under the Act in March 2021. Following the passing of the required regulations, Uganda also set up the Personal Data Protection Office, which started its operations in August 2021, following my appointment as the National Personal Data Protection Director and other. Africa, we have more countries year on year adopting data protection laws. This trend cannot have come at a better time than this. Over the last 2 decades, we have witnessed rapid developments in technology, which inevitably have impacted most spheres of our lives. The COVID-19 pandemic has pushed the boundaries even further, as most private and public organizations moved all their operations online to be able to continue offering their services. This also increased the risk to the personal data that these organizations hold and have to access from wherever their staff are. We acknowledge that businesses and governments need personal data to be able to identify us, to provide services, to understand our needs, to improve the services they provide to us, and many other objectives. However, the personal information must be collected and used in compliance with the various laws governing personal data across the region and the globe. In Uganda, these laws include our Constitution, which guarantees our right to privacy, the Data Protection and Privacy Act, and the regulations issued thereunder. The Data Protection and Privacy Act 2019, under Section 3, provides that a data collector, data processor, or data controller, or a person who collects, processes, holds, or uses personal data shall be accountable to the data subject for data collected, processed, held, or used, collect and process data fairly and lawfully, collect, process, use, or hold adequate, relevant, and not excessive or unnecessary personal data, retain personal data for the period authorized by law or for which the data is required, ensure quality of information collected, processed, used, or held, ensure transparency and participation of the data subject in the collection, processing, use, and holding of the personal data, and lastly, observe security safeguards in respect of the data. The office is mandated to ensure that all data collectors, processors, and controllers comply with the principles of data protection enumerated above and the Act. Following the setup of the office in August 2021, we have embarked on a number of activities to set a good foundation for compliance as follows. We are creating awareness, and this we do through engagements such as this symposium, holding meetings with various stakeholders, radio and TV shows, and publications in print media. We are providing training, especially within the organizations that are supposed to comply with this law. As we all know, your weakest link is that staff member who doesn't know what to do. So it's important that we train all our staff. We are hoping that in training all these staff, they will also pass on the message to whoever they interact with. We are registering all data collectors, data processors, and data controllers as required by law. We are also preparing a number of guidance notes and checklists to provide assistance in the registration process and the development of various data protection and privacy frameworks within the organizations. We continue to encourage all data collectors, data processors, and data controllers to designate data protection officers and also implement other measures that will enable those organizations to comply with the Act. Internally, we've also developed a complaint handling mechanism and are receiving and investigating complaints, breach notifications, and handling them as required by law. I therefore urge all organizations that collect, process, and/or hold personal data to register with the office and comply with the law. Organizations should also notify the office of any personal data security breaches they experience. The door is also open for data subjects to raise complaints. All this can be done through our website, which is www.pdpo.go.ug. We believe that if the above measures are implemented adequately and effectively, we shall go a long way in ensuring the much needed awareness for data controllers and data subjects, and also provide the tools needed to ensure compliance with the law. For us to deliver our mandate, we need various partners to create awareness on the obligations of the data collectors, data processors, and data controllers under the law. We also need to create awareness amongst the data subjects on the law, the rights they enjoy under the law, and how they can exercise their rights or defend them when there has been a breach. Partners such as civil society, academia, regulators, industry players in the various sectors play a critical role in ensuring the compliance with the law. I would like to thank all those who have worked tirelessly towards the success of this symposium. It's the third event of its kind, and every year continues to attract more participants and also discuss pertinent issues on data protection and privacy. I would like to make particular mention of unwanted witness and thank them for the work they have done to ensure as many organizations as possible are awake to their obligations and that citizens are aware of their rights under the Act. To our parent ministry and supervisor, Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, our gratitude for enabling the enactment of the relevant laws that have ensured Uganda continues to be at the forefront of ICT legislation. It is now our duty to ensure these laws are implemented and enforced so that their intended objective is achieved. We all have the responsibility to continue this conversation beyond these few days. Our website, which I provided earlier on, will provide some information on the common questions you may have, and I urge you to make use of it. I urge all organizations that collect, process, and/or hold personal data to register with the office as required by law. We have given a grace period up to the end of December 2021 to allow for the registration process by all relevant organizations or persons. Starting January 2022, we shall start enforcement measures against companies who have not registered. We also encourage data subjects to continue to engage on matters of data protection and raise any complaints they may have with the office. The Personal Data Protection Office is committed to monitor and, if necessary, enforce the law as mandated, and is counting on all of you to do your part. Last but not least, data protection and privacy organizations across Africa need to work together. This can be achieved through cooperation on regulatory actions such as enforcement, investigations, audits, and complaints handling. This will minimize duplication of investigatory effort and speed up resolution of cross-border complaints. And for businesses, this will provide more consistency in how they are being regulated by us. I wish you fruitful deliberations. Let us all remember our privacy matters. I thank you for listening to me.
Wow, thank you so much, Stella. Indeed, like you wrapped it up there, our privacy matters. And congratulations, Stella, on that new role. The office only being open in August, and it's amazing to see how much work has been done thus far. You know, one of the things I'm excited about and looking forward to on day 3, we're going to be having a privacy scorecard to see how the different stakeholders have performed. And certainly looking forward to the outcome of that. But for all the other stakeholders, like Stella said, you still have a grace period up to the end of this year to comply and to register with her office. Well, friends, at this point in time, without further ado, we're now finally ready for our panel discussion. And Angella, I asked the question, what would you like us to handle in this symposium? And I'd like to just see some of the messages coming through from the chat room. I can see different messages. If they could just put those up on my screen so I can see. Somebody says, hi, Jay, to protect the victims of all GBV because of a trending problem. All right, and keep those questions or expectations coming. Someone says, hello from Tokyo. I want to learn more about data protection and what Fujitsu and My Data Global community can contribute to Africa. Thank you so much. Well, our panel discussion is really going to be data protection authorities. The question of independence, trust, and transparency. And I'm about to invite a man again who is very equal to the task. He is a senior and seasoned TV host and moderator downtown Kampala, Uganda. He is a father. He's a Pan-Africanist, judging from his dress code today. And I know this man loves music. So for my friend all the way from Tokyo, you missed out on the band. But I know Samson Kasula, who I'm about to invite, every time I've found him, is humming to an old song by Miriam Makeba. The song is called Malaika. That is really about beautiful lady, I think. I don't know who he has in mind when he's singing this one. But I'm going to ask the band to give us Malaika, and I'm going to challenge Mr. Kasula to come on singing to the same song as he gets ready. Come on. the saxophone. Do the choruses one more time for the benefit of all those out there who want to dance the song. So, Lala, take us away this one more time, Malaika. Thank you so much, our wonderful band. And that's a beautiful song, Miriam Makeba. And I could see, I think it was Jay Sharma in the comment section saying, what a wonderful rendition of that song by Miriam Makeba. Thank you so much for doing that cover. What does this song mean to you, Samson? You seem to love this song very much.
Every time I listen to African music, I ask other people, I ask those around me, do other people also sing? I think we sing, then other people try to sing.
Wow, wow.
Every African sing. Every African is born
a musician.
with rhythm.
Mm-hmm.
You just have to play an African tune, and an African will find Africanness in them.
Wow.
Have you been to a place where other people from other places try to sing?
Oh yeah, and you can see.
Rhythm was not born in other places.
It was born in Africa.
Yes.
My friends from
dancing properly.
yeah,
They've been around Africa.
long enough. Someone joked and said, my friends from the UK don't dance to the beat, they dance to the lyrics. So I hear exactly what you mean. But today we're going to be talking about, data protection at home. I know you're very active on social media, Twitter to be precise. And sometimes some people love to hate you, others just, what does the privacy of your data really mean to you, Samson?
It definitely means everything, and lately I think there is a very, very dangerous business coming around of hacking into persons' phones and then ransoming them. In the sense that if you don't give me so much, this stuff is going to go out.
Maybe it's your needs.
I told somebody, put them out there, I will train as well. So it has become such an important thing, protection of data, because that's who you are.
Yeah.
It really is who you are, and sadly, the wrong side of the business is here, so it becomes important for us to have a conversation on data protection, especially for those in the places and in the business of regulation. I think their job has never been more important than it is now, especially now that coronavirus has posted and forced more of us onto the internet than has ever been seen. on this planet, if you may.
That's true. And so what I'm going to do right now is just hand you the instruments of power and I'll let you moderate this session. I think data protection authorities, the question of independence, trust, and transparency. So over to you, Samson.
Thank you very much. And there are thousands of cameras here. I have started into the main camera. Thank you so much for those of you doing a responsible job of doing this. Those of you online, thank you so much for being with us. And what we're going to get into is the whole idea that regulatory authorities do play a very significant role in countries where there is legislation, and the legislation here is for protecting the privacy and that of personal data. That protection authorities, will be calling them DPAs here, represent one of the actors, not only when it does come to the execution of privacy and data protection policies, but also in terms of awareness raising, consultancy, and networking. And here is the SIDS. Yes, SIDS, they are at the forefront of supervising privacy and data protection compliance. Their independence, that's going to be key here. Their independence. Are they independent? Can they be independent? If they are not and can't be, what is the consequence thereof? And we are asking, can they be independent from the private as well as political domain when it comes to the utmost importance that the issue of resident concern. This panel will engage experts in policy regulation and also present heads of regulatory authorities on the continent, beautiful continent of Africa. That's mine. In examining the question of independence, that's the question we are going to deal with. And it is my pleasure to introduce the persons on the panel, and I'll give you reasons why you should be listening to them. I'll begin with Lady Awa Ndiaye. Awa Ndiaye is a holder of a doctorate. to begin this panel. And I'll begin this panel by giving 5 minutes to each of the panelists to answer this particular question. And we'll begin with going down the pecking order. Our half, or we could say almost half of Africa's 53 countries have adopted some form of legislation aimed at protecting the digital data of their citizens at country level. And in your opinion, how independent is your authority in your respective country?
Chaque trimestre, nous publions ce qu'on appelle un avis trimestriel qui recense systématiquement toutes les décisions et tous les actes et donc nous les portons à la connaissance. Donc, vous publions également sur notre site internet, mais également sur toutes nos pages de réseaux sociaux qui nous permet d'avoir une forte interaction avec les entreprises sur nos réseaux sociaux. Nous publions également puisque la loi et nous demande de le faire chaque année dans un rapport annuel. La CDP, la Commission, elle a privilégié la transparence dans l'exercice. Et c'est pour cela que nous avons décidé l'année dernière, il y a 2 ans, de revoir notre loi, d'actualiser la loi, notre loi date de 2008, et avec très rapide nous avons fait après, nous avons impliqué tous les acteurs concernés par l'environnement. Nous avons ouvert et nous avons véritablement voté pour travailler. C'est pour dire que l'indépendance sorte de l'organisation et la transparence est véritablement dans le cadre.
Well, that's the interesting thing about translations. They are a lot shorter than what they are translating. It's a magic of translation. Let's get to immaculate. Immaculate, still going back to the same question we raised. There are data protection laws for digital data and citizens at country level. From where you come from in Kenya, do you feel that the authority is independent? I was coming to you asking, do you feel that there is independence of the authority that is responsible for protection of digital and personal data?
It's intermittent, we are missing some words. Should I go ahead and address the issue of independence?
Absolutely, go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you for this session. I really do want to appreciate it. Also acknowledge the presence of my fellow panelists, that is data, personal data protection, Officer Stella, Alibateese, Mohammed Dion, Tugume, and the rest of him. Just to go straight to the point, the independence of the Office of the Data Commissioner, in our case, we are independent as stipulated by the law. Operationally, under the law section 8, we are required to actually act independent in the exercise of our powers. And under this, we have the power to independently conduct investigation under our own initiative or based on the complaint. Of course, independently make a decision on whether we want to obtain professional assistance, facilitate conciliation, issue summons, impose administrative fine, and undertake any activity necessary for the fulfillment of the office. That is in as far as the function of the office. 2 is financially independent. We are further given a mandate to be independent under the Act, that is Section 67, where the assets and monies allocated to the office.
We are supposed to be accrued by the office. And finally, issue of staffing. Besides, we are supposed to actually recruit our own staff in as far as the office is concerned. And I believe those are the 3 critical elements that mean the independence.
The capacity to undertake your work independently, 2, the financial independence, and 3, the staffing independence. When we put this together as an office, we are independent in terms as far as conducting our work is concerned. Over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Of course, still reminding those of you online that you remember to mute. Immaculate, I won't leave you. Let me also ask this. Recently, High Court halted the rolling out of Huduma number for breach of the country's data protection law. What does this essentially mean to your office, and what lessons can other continental regulators learn from the Kenyan experience?
I don't know about Uganda, but I know the matter is in appeal, and it would not be wise to comment on something that is currently ongoing. But I think I'll leave it at that. The only thing I'd like to emphasize is that as a principle of law as a country, we don't work retrospectively. When data was collected and as far as freedom was concerned, this office and the Data Protection Act were not in force. So I'll leave it at that, because the other details would basically be discussed in matter that is in court. Once it's completed, then we'll have an opportunity to discuss it in detail. Thank you.
Immaculate is very well trained in matters law there, so we do know of the rule of sub judice, and she's left it at that. We'll come to Stella. Stella close to us here. Stella, we're still talking independence, we're talking independence vis-a-vis protection of data. Do you feel that that independence is there? Can it even be there?
Thank you very much, Samson. I hope everyone can hear me. Just like the previous speakers, The legislators, that is Parliament, provided for our independence under Section 5(3) of the Act, which I'll read verbatim. It says the office, in performing its functions under this Act, shall not be under the direction or control of any person or authority. Likewise, in the regulations provide that in the NITA, because we are an office within an existing office, shall handle its functions separately from that of the office, and the office is also given mandate to handle any issues related to financial matters, property matters, and the like. Of course, as I indicated in my remarks at the beginning, we just started in August 2021. What I can confirm right now is that the NITAU management and the Board of Management are ensuring that we are independent. So we have our own frameworks, we are handling our own finances, we have the mandate to institute investigations and all the attendant activities. Obviously, because we've just started, we can't say much, but what I can confirm is that the law gives us the necessary independence, similar to the independence it gives to other mandated commissions in the country. Thank you.
Stella, still staying with you for a bit. There's what the law says, and there's what happens in real terms. Do you get a sense that from what you already see, it is going to be very easy for what the law says to work in real practice?
Yes, it will, because internally within NITA Uganda, this has already been actualized. The beauty about the Data Protection and Privacy Act is that within the regulations also enabled that independence to be actualized. So when you hear issues like the office shall manage its own finances, it shall manage its own property, it will interact with, it will make decisions on which organizations to work with. That is part of the independence. And so far, I see that being actualized.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Stella. It's certainly been a pleasure sharing your thoughts. Let's go to Tunde, who has quite a bit of experience here as well. Tunde, still on the question of independence, as the other panelists answered it, but I also add the other question to you, Tunde. What is your assessment of the data protection authorities established so far in Africa? Those are the two ones for you, Tunde.
All right, thank you very much. Very much a pleasure to be here and the only male on a all-women panel, so I feel especially privileged to be among expert women and African women today, including Madam Awa Ndiaye, Madam Immaculata Kasait, Madam Sande, and Madam Stella Alibateese. And excuse the mispronunciations. As mentioned, in data privacy, that includes the digital transformation strategy for Africa that was passed by the African Union heads of state and General Assembly in 2020. There are currently ongoing consultations around digital ID interoperability for the continent, and perhaps most especially relevant here, a data governance policy for the continent. In addition, the African Continental Free Trade Area that binds all the 54, 55 countries on the continent into a single digital economy and will be guided by an e-commerce protocol, all affect the issues around data collection, data ownership, and data privacy. To the question of the state of data protection and the independence of data protection authorities, I think the answer is, from an independence perspective, the answer is yes, and the answer is no. So if we look across the continent, as has been noted, perhaps more than half of the continent or more have some kind of data protection laws that are in one form or the other. However, there's probably no more than 10 or 12 countries that have actually implemented a data protection law and implemented a data protection authority. And those include Cote d'Ivoire, Benin, of course we've heard from Senegal, Kenya, Ghana, South Africa, Togo, Uganda, and we've also heard from Niger. But apart from perhaps these 20%, the other countries and member states are not even in the game yet, so to speak, in terms of the data protection authority. From the perspective of the DPAs, we've heard from the experts about the independence. So I think in that category, there's plenty to celebrate, there's plenty to learn. Hopefully many of the other African countries will take the lead of some of the DPAs we've heard from here to move the process forward. But even in some cases, I think, you know, with the independence of finance, of staffing, of legal, some of these actions are yet to be tested in court from an implementation perspective. And so maybe my final comment here is that it is a process. It has started. Dawn is breaking, as has been the theme of this conference, but we are yet to be in full daylight. Thank you very much.
Tunde, still staying with you, data protection requires authorities that are well-staffed, that are technical, and also have the financial resources. Do you get a sense that this is a reality across the nations you spoke about? And two, if that's not the case, from your opinion, what sort of necessary changes need to be made?
Thank you for that question. I think that, as we've heard from the experts on this panel, a significant progress is being made, and the direction of independence is well established. Unfortunately, one of the things that we know about this area is that technology and data is moving very quickly, and as a general challenge globally, regulations typically lag the technical advances. You know, the use of data has expanded so enormously that even without specific private information, it is possible to triangulate and target and learn and influence people's behaviors from certain kinds of anonymized data. If you have enough data points, including things like movement, including things like spending, including things such as background details. Without any specific individual knowledge, you can still identify people. So I think that a good start has been made, but I think that even in cases where DPAs have been established, there's going to be a need to expand and deepen that function past how we have traditionally looked at individual data, because and very large data sets, the issue of privacy becomes much more complicated.
Thank you so much, Tunde, there. Harm related to data exploitation.
Oui, il est évident que le problème de l'indépendance et de la transparence est un problème difficile, et un problème d'autant plus difficile que c'est encore un domaine nouveau en Afrique, comme l'a dit Tunde. Mais je pense qu'il serait important, avant de répondre à votre question, de souligner le fait que l'Union africaine devrait soutenir les États dans ce sens-là, aussi bien les États qui ont démarré et essaient de faire des choses, que les États qui ne sont pas encore dans le jeu, comme il l'a dit lui-même, et il reviendrait à l'Union africaine de soutenir et d'aider, d'accompagner les États pour qu'ensemble, le continent puisse véritablement jouer sa partition dans cette mouvance qui est inéluctable. Pour ce qui est de la collaboration entre la Commission sénégalaise et les organisations de la société civile, elle s'articule autour de 3 axes majeurs. Le premier axe, c'est que les organisations de la société civile sont représentées au sein de la société, de la Commission de protection des données personnelles. Pas représentées, mais elles sont partie prenante, puisque ce que nous appelons notre session plénière, où sont réunis tous les commissaires, c'est-à-dire que les personnalités qui décident, qui prennent des décisions concernant donc tout ce qui est protection des données personnelles. Il y a donc plusieurs personnalités qui viennent de plusieurs secteurs différents et il y a également la société civile qui est largement représentée par les organisations de défense des droits de l'homme et par les organisations professionnelles comme le patronat par exemple. Ce qui permet à la société civile donc de garantir le respect de la loi, mais également d'être l'œil du grand public et de la société civile dans ce que nous faisons. Le deuxième axe majeur de collaboration, c'est ce que nous avons entamé et bien entamé avec les organisations de la société civile, c'est de faire en sorte que pour qu'elles puissent jouer pleinement leur partition et qu'elles puissent jouer leur rôle de veille, nous avons voulu renforcer leur capacité en matière de protection de données personnelles. Et à cet effet, nous avons donc eu plusieurs séminaires d'échanges, de formation, donc de discussions avec les différentes organisations de la société civile, aussi bien les organisations féminines que les syndicats et les professionnels des médias, que les associations des consommateurs, les artisans, les groupements féminins, les chambres de commerce, le Conseil national du patronat et d'une manière générale, tout ce qu'au Sénégal nous appelons le secteur informel, donc les travailleurs de l'informel, pour les aider justement à maîtriser l'utilisation des réseaux sociaux, maîtriser leur utilisation de tout ce qui est système de vidéosurveillance, système biométrique, etc. Donc, tous ces axes majeurs qui tournent autour de la protection des données personnelles et qu'ils ont le mandat, d'une certaine manière, de protéger, de garantir pour la société. Il faudrait donc eux-mêmes qu'on soit bien conscients et qu'ils connaissent les tenants et les aboutissants. Et donc, cette collaboration s'est également faite autour d'actions de sensibilisation, de vulgarisation et de formation que nous avons instituées à leur profit. Le troisième palier, c'est justement la formalisation de conventions et de protocoles d'accord avec les différentes organisations de la société civile. Leur rôle est important dans leur statut de veille et d'observation du respect de la législation. C'est pour cela que nous avons tenu à signer des conventions et des protocoles d'accord avec certaines organisations comme le Comité sénégalais des droits de l'homme, par exemple, afin de les aider justement à garantir le respect des engagements internationaux, mais également à améliorer la protection des citoyens sénégalais par rapport à leurs données personnelles et à leur vie privée. Avec l'Association des femmes leaders également, nous avons signé une convention et nous avons fait d'elles les ambassadrices de la protection des données personnelles et nous avons demandé de porter la voix de l'instance de régulation. Nous avons également signé des protocoles d'accord avec les professionnels des technologies de l'information et de la communication des protocoles d'accord avec les syndicats des professionnels de l'information et de la communication, car tout le monde connaît le rôle majeur du secteur des médias quant à l'appropriation des mécanismes de protection des données personnelles. Et nous avons également une association majeure dans qui s'appelle l'ASUTIC, c'est l'association des utilisateurs de TIC. C'est une organisation de la société civile qui se bat, justement, qui est un partenaire majeur de la commission de protection, qui se bat pour le respect des droits et des libertés fondamentales des utilisateurs du service de numérique et des télécommunications. Avec eux, nous avons véritablement engagé une grande réflexion et nous avons, bien entendu, partagé l'amélioration du cadre juridique, comme je l'ai dit tout à l'heure, l'amélioration du cadre juridique, donc la réactualisation de la loi en matière de protection des données personnelles. Nous sommes sur le point de signer un accord très important avec un organe d'autorégulation des médias qui s'appelle le CORED, Observation des règles d'éthique et de déontologie dans les médias. Cet organisme qui est un organisme donc, de régulation par les pairs, va nous aider à lutter contre les dérives liées aux données personnelles et à la vie privée que nous avons notées dans les médias. Donc, toutes ces démarches nous aident à asseoir une collaboration forte avec les organisations de la société civile et à les impliquer véritablement dans le travail que nous faisons, aussi bien par rapport à la réactualisation de la loi que par des actions de sensibilisation que nous menons avec eux et pour eux. Merci.
Merci. Monsieur Traducteur, et bienvenue.
Merci. Hello?
Yes, Mr. Translator.
Briefly, it was she was talking about the Data Protection Authority of Senegal includes the civil society into their everyday work of protecting data. She said that they have signed different protocols with syndicates of information professionals, and they actually organize a lot of trainings, internship to several members of the civil society so that they become conscious, several members of the civil society into the decision-making policies and the understanding of how the Data Protection Act works. She also mentioned that there is a lot of association of civil rights that fights for the rights of telecom users, so that the telecom societies don't overuse the personal data, and those civil society associations are also in partnership with data protection authorities. And through that, the DPA of Senegal is trying to include and have the social society included in their everyday work so that they partner with them.
Merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. And coming back to you, Immaculate, your thoughts on what Awa and Tunde have said.
Just going back to what we see, one as the role of civil society in as far as data protection is, civil society plays a significant role when it comes to digital awareness. And I think that is one of their critical roles as far as being in a new area of data protection. And the fact that the world is now moving to ensuring that people live with dignity, their personal information is protected. It's important that civil society plays a critical role in creating awareness around data protection, what it means, how their rights can be achieved. And using that awareness, it's the same thing then you're able to empower citizens to be able to access those rights or demand for those rights, whether it's a right to erasure, right to data portability, right to be forgotten, right to correction of information. So digital awareness is a critical role. The other one, which is also critical, civil society playing an oversight role has an opportunity to also bring out some of those abuses of data, by whether it's by data controllers or data processors. They have that opportunity to raise, either in their own motion or otherwise, to say this is happening. So that's another role in terms of watching over the rights of data subjects. The other role I see for civil society is an issue of partnership and collaboration, whether it is in terms of giving insights in whether there are sector-specific regulations or whether they are general regulations or any advisories. Civil society, I see a partnership or collaboration in terms of them giving their inputs in as far as data protection is concerned. The other role I see is on exchange, because in that space, they've had an opportunity maybe to share information of Africa or the globe. So information exchange is another important way that civil society can play in as far as data protection is concerned. There was a question, I think, by Ransom on you asked him to address the issue of independent trust and transparency. I would say you would say when you look at independence in an institution, it's how you're able to demonstrate operational independence that then you're able to build trust to the general public, and being open in terms of what you're planning to do, and also being forthright if you're experiencing challenges. That way you're transparent to the extent which you're able to do your work. So when we are able to achieve independence, you'll also be able to acquire trust, and also able to explain to people in as far as what transparency and what you're doing as a data protection authority. I think I'll leave it there, moderator, for now. Thank you.
Asante sana, Madam Kasait there. Coming back to you, Stella, here, in 2014, African heads of state endorsed the Malabo Convention, African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Protection of Personal Data. We have eaten 7 years into that. Unfortunately, states with data protection legislation have not yet ratified the convention. Doesn't this downplay the continent's commitment to protection of the privacy? And we're talking right here, do we have, as Africans, understand privacy at all?
Thank you, Samson, for that question. Indeed, in that area, as a continent, we've performed poorly. As of today, there are only 8 countries out of 55 countries that have ratified this convention, and only 14 states have signed the convention. This is 7 years down the road. We can excuse the fact that maybe because of COVID, a lot of activities were disrupted, because when you go to the African Union website, you'll find that Angola was the last country to ratify, and it did that on 2020. The pandemic hit Africa. Now, before I even talk about the convention, I thought it was important for me to clarify a little on what the convention is about. The African Union Convention on Cybersecurity and Personal Data Protection cover 3 main areas. These are e-transactions, personal data protection, and privacy, and cybersecurity. Now, under personal data protection, it provides for many things that are also already provided for in many of our laws, at least for those countries that have passed data protection and privacy laws. It provides for obligations of data controllers. It provides for rights of the data subjects. These have already been enumerated by the previous speakers, such as the right to information, the right to access, the right to rectification or erasure, the right to object. Rightly stated earlier also is that 50% of African countries have now passed data protection laws and are in varying phases of implementation. I believe this should say a lot, that all is not lost yet. Whereas they may not have ratified the convention yet, they've still taken measures to ensure that they pass legislation that ensures the protection of personal data. In all spheres of life, we all develop at different stages. And I believe what is happening to within us. While some countries may move quickly, others are a bit slow, others want, more clarifications, others may be unhappy about the convention. You really can't understand why they are not ratifying the convention. However, I think what we need to look at is within our own countries, how many countries are actually passing this legislation. Because I believe once a country passes the legislation, then that is a step forward towards ratifying the convention, because then they understand the issues more, they align more with the issues. I'll note that at least for Uganda and probably Kenya, most of our laws are similar because we follow the EAC Cyber Law Harmonization Framework, which was passed way back in 2008, even before the Malabo Convention had been passed under the African Union. So while it is true that ratification has been slow, all is not lost. The other good news I would like to give the participants is that the AU under a PRIDA program has been working on the data harmonization across Africa and has also developed a monitoring and evaluation framework where they will be able to follow up some of these issues. Now, some of the key indicators under that harmonization framework include indicators, for instance, has the country ratified the convention? Does the country have personal data protection legislation? If it has personal data protection legislation, does that legislation cover the minimum requirements that are provided for in the convention? Does the country have a national authority for personal data protection regulation? Is the country creating awareness for data subjects on their rights and how to exercise them? Has the country enumerated the principles of personal data protection that are in So I believe that M&E framework, if implemented effectively, will also fast track the ratification of the Malabo Convention. Thank you, Samson.
Thank you very much, Stella. There. Let me come back to you, Tunde, in your closing remarks, because we've got to wind this up, fortunately or unfortunately, depending on which way we see it. In a context where we're still battling with matters human rights, do you think we can get to a place where we understand the importance of data protection and privacy online? Tunde, in a minute, if that's possible.
Thank you. I think the answer is yes. I think that particularly with COVID-19 and the move to online and virtual, these type of Zoom conferences, I think data protection, the importance of data in e-commerce and personal education, health, agriculture is now very well recognized across the continent. I think we are in a process, as has been mentioned by some of the panelists, that in many cases a good start has been made, but there is still much to be done. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tunde. It's certainly been a pleasure having you. Your concluding remarks in about a minute, if you may.
Oui, je me réjouis de ce symposium. Ça fut vraiment important et intéressant. C'est vrai que beaucoup de choses restent à faire. Et c'est vrai que la Convention de Malabo est un instrument extrêmement important pour l'Afrique. Et il serait très important que commerce soit véritablement développé à l'intérieur des frontières africaines et à l'extérieur également avec nos partenaires étrangers. Donc, extrêmement important. Et je pense que, je le redis à nouveau, l'Union africaine devrait prendre le lead et véritablement soutenir les pays pour que nous puissions arriver à cet objectif. Je vous remercie.
Ça tient en place de vous avoir. It's certainly been a pleasure having you. Let's get a word from the translator, and then we'll come back to other panelists here.
Hello. Hawa is rejoicing. Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
She is happy of a part of this panel, and she said that it is true that much has to be done. And it is true that the UA has to take the lead into supporting the different countries of Africa that have not ratified the convention or have not established legislation onto data protection, because it is no more a luxury. It is not a luxury anymore. It has become an absolute necessity that these data protection laws have to be implemented, because Africa Union and has to support its different members to guarantee the safety of these data and to guarantee the safety of e-commerce, because they use these type of data. And also the UA have to take the lead into trying to have the Malabo Convention be ratified by more members, and through the harmonization, through the project of FRIDA that Ms. Stella mentioned. And yes, in brief, it is an absolute necessity, not a luxury, to establish those legislation that concerns data protection laws.
Thank you very much. And Immaculate, your concluding remarks?
Thank you. My concluding remarks is one, to appreciate the organizers of Third Privacy Symposium. I believe data protection is, and it brings a new dawn when it comes to personal dignity and information. It's an opportunity for us to begin reflecting on individual information and how it will be used and for whatever purpose. We begin to ask ourselves critical questioning as far as data protection is concerned. It's an opportunity for us as we continue to each country getting into the arena of data protection to start having conversation about ratification of the Malabo Convention. And finally, to note that when it comes to data protection, it's an area that will require collaboration between the authorities, the civil society, private sector, because when it comes to data protection, the concern should be, the call should actually be about compliance. And the compliance so that we as a continent, we as a region, we as a country are working towards ensuring that individual information is protected so that we enhance the business environment and also enhance personal individual dignity as far as data protection is concerned. Thank you.
Shukrani kabisa, or if I may, asante sana. And I will certainly catch up with you sometime soon. Let's finish off with Stella, if you may, your concluding remarks.
Thank you very much, Samson. If you may allow, there were 2 questions in the question and answer that I would like to respond to before I give my concluding remarks.
Please do, albeit briefly.
There was a question from Brian Biaruhanga, wondering what the office is doing to make sure that citizens know their digital rights. My answer is that symposiums such as this, our partnership with civil society, is helping to amplify this voice. We are doing a lot of awareness, and people such as Brian can also help us to amplify this voice. This journey has just started. Yes, our work is cut out for us, but we are doing everything that we can to be able to talk about these issues on radios, on TV, in print, on social media. But it is important that anyone who understands this topic also amplifies it. We are making efforts to also speak in our local languages, and that is not very easy when you talk about digital language, but we are making effort in that area. The other question was from Godfrey Lutaya, asking how effective supervisory authorities are when it comes to investigating public institutions and advising the government on privacy matters. What we need to know is that our laws, including even the Malabo Convention, ensures that matters of privacy, matters of personal data protection apply to the public and private organizations. On our part, as Uganda, we do advise government agencies, especially if they are going to set up what we believe are sensitive projects, or where we know citizens are complaining. We've been asking them to do impact assessments. These impact assessments help to identify risks and make sure that in developing these programs, these risks are identified and addressed or mitigated. NITA, because the office hadn't yet been set up, NITA drew the attention of the politicians to this privacy law, and in all efforts, they made effort to comply. So we will do our best to make sure that we advise government and advise them early enough before mistakes are made. For my last remarks, I want to thank the organizers of this symposium, Unwanted Witness, Minister of ICT, and of course, I don't know if you can thank yourself, the Personal Data Protection Office, for organizing this very important symposium. I want to thank my fellow panelists. I want to welcome my fellow Data Protection Commissioners, Ms. Awa, Ms. Immaculate, to the Pearl of Africa, even though it is virtual. I know we've been interacting as data protections in Africa. We already have a forum where we engage, where we discuss, where we even engage the mighty Meta or Facebook as it is called. So I'm very, very happy to be part of this panel and to learn from you and to make sure that together we continue this journey and ensure compliance across Africa. Samson, thank you very much for the good moderation. Mr. Tunde, I'm privileged to be on the same panel as you are, and I look forward to continued interaction. As I normally say, our privacy matters, and let's continue this conversation beyond these few days. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Stella and Immaculate, and as well as Tunde, and thank you so much for those of you who are on. And in terms of what you pick out of here is that there are persons who are involved in the process of making sure that our data is protected. But whilst that may happen, as somebody who is in the space of journalism, I can tell you that whilst you're online, even if you're behind a pseudo account and a pseudo name, behave yourself. Because if you don't behave yourself, it is very possible that somehow somebody will know who you are, they will know where you stay, and they will show up at your front door, and they'll take you to a police station to answer some questions. And that can be a very, very interesting process. So behave online as you practice a free space and enjoy your own rights. So I'll hand you over to the band. I think it's about time we heard some African music. I had a shower come down on me as I came here. I have dried a bit, but as the African music plays, I'll sing along and we'll dry. Let's get into the music as we prepare for the next event. Come on, let's have some African music.
He went up and down. iwe mamele, iwe nakupenda, iwe mamele. Oh, wait alone, day after day, for love to come away. My eyes are looking, my heart desire a very special man, a very special man. Burning up, I'm burning up, my heart's on fire. I'm burning up, burning up, burning up, I'm burning up, my heart's on fire. I'm burning up, burning up. When he gets here, strong and sincere, with the stars in his eyes, the way he talks holds me when I fall. You be my special man. You be my special man. You be my special man. I'm burning up. I'm burning up. My head's on fire. I'm burning up, burning up, burning up. I'm burning up. My heart's on fire. I'm burning up, burning up. I am a woman's daughter, and I will fill your life with laughter. You don't have to search any longer. You never find a love that is stronger. I don't care about the friends he has. I want you just the way you are. I know your heart is made of gold. You want me out when it's so cold. So come on and take my love is free. Just want you to be with me. Take my love is free. Please, honey, come stay with me. Ooh, yeah. Your beauty's a diamond dream, but to me it doesn't mean a thing. I don't care if you have no money, 'cause money can't buy me honey. So come on and take my love is free. Just want you to be with me. Take my love is free. Please, honey, come stay with me. Ooh, yeah. Waking up early morning to please my people with African beer. Everybody, come and drink my African beer. Everybody, come and drink my African beer.
Yeah.
I'll make sure the fire can make my beer. Mukombati, Mukombati, Mukombati is African beer. Everybody, come and drink my magic beer. Everybody, come and drink my African beer. Come and drink my African beer.
Wow, 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 wow. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back from that short musical break. And that is our resident band. They're called the Titanic Band. And they've done a mashup of a few songs from Yvonne Chaka Chaka, Mkomboti. I don't know if it's Mkomboti time, but maybe we should wrap this up so you can go and sip on some Mkomboti. I think they also did Mama Land and a few others. There was one by, Misua by Monique Seka. Thank you so much. I hope the rest of you are enjoying and finding this beneficial for the time that you've spent here thus far. Special shouts out to all our panelists. A very good job that you guys did. Shouts out to our moderator, Mr. Kasumba, I think who did a good job, and our Stella, Tunde, and Immaculate. Thank you. Maybe for our guests, the panelists, I mean those who are attending today, in the chat room, what stood out for you from that conversation that we just had? So maybe just type one or two highlights that stood out for you from the panel discussion that Kasumba very ably handled. Please just put those messages in the chat room and I'll be reading a few, but I can already see some messages coming through from Tunde, one of the panelists, saying thank you Samson, panelists and unwanted witness for this important event. And so many shouts out that are coming through there. Someone with a comment saying, if Meta wants to turn off internet in South America, they simply shut down WhatsApp. I don't know if WhatsApp is the internet, but that might not be only common to South America. Even here in Uganda, when they switched off WhatsApp, it was like internet had been switched off. But feel free to share some of the comments that have come through from that discussion that we had. Now, before I introduce the workshop we're about to get into, again, special shouts out to all our sponsors, and those include Omedia Network, thank you so much. Nita Uganda, thank you, we couldn't have done this without you. Digital Human Rights Lab, thank you so much. Data Protection Training, thank you so much. PI, I didn't mention PI earlier, they've been very fundamental in bringing this symposium together. The Ministry of ICT and National Guidance, and of course Katende Sempewa Advocates, thank you so much. And last but not least, the Privacy Scorecard, which we shall be having a look at on the last day, which is Friday. But right now, all the way from PDPO, I have joining me on the set Angella Tugume, who is the Manager Data Protection Affairs. And Angella is going to be giving us, handling the next workshop on data security, importance, types, and solutions. Angella, you're absolutely welcome.
Thank you very much, Ronnie.
How are you doing and how are you finding the symposium thus far?
The symposium is awesome, amazing stuff that I'm learning as well.
Yeah.
I wish it would go on for like 5 days.
Are you sure?
Like 7 days, yeah. But it's amazing. The panel was amazing. Amazing insights, nuggets, out there for us. Yeah, and I'm excited.
All right, maybe now that I have you here, and I may be jumping the gun, but based on the workshop you're going to give us, I have a question. You know, I'm new to some of these things, and I want to know, and I'm asking on behalf of all the new entrants into this area of data protection and all of that, what is the difference between data privacy and data security? Does my question make sense?
You have jumped the biggest gun.
Are you sure? Well, I hope you're going to answer that question then as you handle your workshop. But ladies and gentlemen, right now I leave you in the capable hands of Angella as she takes us away for this workshop, and I'll be right back after this. Angella, take this away.
Thank you very much, Ronnie. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for being with us today. My name is Angella, and I'm just going to take us through a workshop or a discussion about data security. I'll just begin with a very first question that Ronnie asked. What's the difference between data privacy and data security, or information privacy and information security? So I'll begin with information privacy or data privacy. We know that when we're looking at data privacy, we are looking at addressing the rights of individuals and to what extent their information, their personal information, is processed, collected, and further used. So that's privacy. And when we talk about data security or information security, we are basically looking at ensuring the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of that personal data or information. So as we go on further, I'll break down confidentiality, integrity, and availability. But while we're at it, you can throw comments in the chat what confidentiality means to you, what integrity means, and what availability means. What do those three words mean to you? So remember, every time we talk about data security, information security, those three words should come to mind, which is confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So the key thing is, I liked Ronnie's question, by the way, data privacy and data security come close in so many ways. And the first thing is that you cannot have data privacy without data security. Okay, so if you want to achieve privacy, you must have security. That's what it is. But you can have security and not have privacy. So you can keep the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of data, and you're not looking at the rights of individuals to their privacy, how their data is used, and how it's processed. So when we talk about integrity in data security, when you come to the bit of privacy, we are looking at accuracy. So where you have integrity in data security, that will assure accuracy when we talk about privacy. Accountability cuts across both of them. It's accountability in information security, it's accountability in information privacy. Access for privacy and availability for security. So for you to be able to have access in the privacy world, this side of security, there must be availability. We'll dive a little bit into what availability is later on. And of course, authorized access. That means the right people should have access to the right information and in the right extent. Okay, I see our presentation is coming up. Okay, so we can move to the next slides, if you will. Okay, next slide. And then the next slide. Okay, so the topic today is, why do we need data security. Remember, I've been singing confidentiality, and so we're going to dive a little bit into what confidentiality is. So we're looking at what do our security measures need to protect, and we're going to look at those security measures later on, but I would like to first draw our attention to the fact that we have these security measures in place to protect something. They're not just there for just the purpose of being there. Now, confidentiality, we must protect confidentiality. What does this mean? It means that how is that data accessed? Who accesses it? How is it changed? How is it disclosed? How is it deleted? Are those actions done by the authorized or the rightful people in the right period of time? For example, we know that in data security, we must come to a point where we destroy data. Now, if that data is destroyed before the right time, if it's still in use and it's destroyed and it's deleted, now that's a problem. So that is why we need to make sure that we have confidentiality and make sure that people act within the scope of authority that is given unto them. So remember, that's confidentiality. Then we move on to integrity. The integrity of this data. So our measures as well protect the integrity. The data that you hold, is it accurate? Is it complete in relation as to why you are processing it? If you're processing data about myself and it's not complete and my birth date probably doesn't have a year or doesn't have a month, then that data is not accurate. And if the purpose for which you're using is to determine my age and maybe give me a service or something, then that data is not accurate. So it must be accurate. It must be complete in relation to the purpose that you're using it for. And then the last and important one is availability. I don't know if we have availability. Now, imagine you have work to do, you have things to do, and you wake up one morning and your data is unavailable. So we are saying a critical component in why we protect data is to make sure that it remains accessible, it remains usable whenever we need it. We talked about the fact that a data subject will come and ask for their data and ask you as an organization, what kind of data do you hold about me? Now, if you cannot access that data and the data subject is asking for that data, then we have a problem at that point. So that is why we should be able to recover that data and prevent any damage or distress to individuals concerned that need it. And as we go along, we'll look at how we can make the data available, how we can make it, make sure we're guarding its confidentiality and integrity. Okay, so the key question that you may be asking right now is that, why should I even worry about data security? Why should organizations worry about it? Now, when you have poor data security or poor information security, your systems are left at risk. Now, that means that they are susceptible to being hacked into, and individuals' data, if you collect a lot of personal data, that data is privy to the wrong hands. And that means we have destroyed the cycle, the triad of information security. Remember what we talked about? The confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So without data security, we have none of those three elements. And those are the three elements that we really, really need to make sure that we have data security. Now, it's very, very pertinent that if you're collecting personal data, you actually protect this data. Why? Because access to this data by the wrongful people means that there is a possibility that real harm will be caused to individuals, real harm to individuals. Key cases are identity fraud, fake credit card transactions, and then if a hacker has access to a lot of personal information about me, that means that they will come and social engineer me That means convince me and tell me about myself, and I'll be like, oh, this guy is probably a prophet. He knows so much information about me. So that means I can easily trust him. And yet this is a hacker, a social engineer. And so they will compromise me because of the fact that they had access to a lot of my personal data. Then, of course, not forgetting the embarrassments and the inconvenience that come with people's data being exposed. And least but not last, it's also a legal requirement. Under the Data Protection and Privacy Act in Uganda, it's a legal requirement to protect data. If you collect data, if you process data, personal data, that's a legal requirement that you should actually protect this data. And if you don't adhere to that, of course, there are consequences, like my good land friends like to say. So we look at the next item. Okay, this is just at a glance, in summary, what does the Act in Uganda require you to do? So the Act specifies that if you process personal data, you must secure it using appropriate technical and organizational measures. What this means is that you must manage your risk, your security risk. And in managing risk, in risk management, you need to identify the risk, you need to analyze it, you need to evaluate it or grade it, and then you need to treat the risk. That means that you have put in place measures that are going to mitigate that risk. Then after you treat the risk, and this is where we fall off most of the time, we forget to monitor. Is this treatment, is the control that we have used working? Is it mitigating the risk the way it should? Or do we need to do something more about that risk? So monitoring is very, very important if you're going to manage security risk. And then, of course, we need to protect this data against cyber attack. And then we need to also detect events and make sure we minimize the impact. There's a saying that if you haven't been hacked, you either have been hacked or you don't know that you have been hacked. So the key thing here is that you probably get hacked at one point, but how do you detect? At what point do you detect that you are being hacked or you have been hacked? And when you realize it, what do you do? How do you recover? So it's very, very important to have a response, a recovery response in place as an organization. We'll see that as we go on. So we go to the gist of the matter, and we look at the data security controls that we've been talking about. I'll just summarize the controls and then we'll dive into some of these controls. So we have, you can classify them as preventive, corrective, or detective. Or you can look at their nature and call them physical controls, the doors, the locks, and all those things, or administrative policy controls. And you have a look at policies, standards, procedures that govern the organization's practices, or you can call them technical controls that govern software processes and data. But I'll dive into what do we mean by preventive controls. So if you have a preventive control, it means that this is a control that you have designed to prior a threat, prior an event, in order to avoid the likelihood of that event happening or the potential impact of that successful threat event. And most of the controls that I'm going to talk about here are mainly preventive. So we're going to look at things like policies, standards, processes. We're going to look at encryption. We're going to look at data retention. We're going to look at staff training, which is very, very important when you talk about training and awareness. And then when we look at corrective controls, these are controls that we put in place to mitigate or limit the impacts of the threat once it has happened. So the threat has happened, but how do we limit the impact? Examples of these are the antivirus software that you have on your systems. Then the detective controls, these will detect when a threat is in motion. And it will help, this will help in investigations and audits. So we have things like logging and monitoring. So let's move on to some of these controls. Let's dive a bit into some of these controls. So when we look at personal data, when we look at data security, how do we protect data? We can use so many controls, but I'll just pull out a few that you can use as an organization. So one of the ways that we can do this is by making data obscure, unclear, or unintelligible. We can use masking, or we can use tokenization to make sure that the personal data that is being transferred, that is in transit, is actually unclear and unintelligible. The other control that we can use is data minimization. We know that one of the principles, one of the things that we say talk a lot about in data privacy is only collect information that you need, information that is directly relevant and necessary to accomplish a specified purpose. So do not collect information in the hope of using it in future. And we look at data segregation, we look at de-identification of this data. We look a bit at some of the ways that we can de-identify data. So some of the ways that we can de-identify data is we can pseudonymize it or anonymize it. So the next slide, we look at data de-identification. That's data de-identification for you. So data that has been pseudonymized is data that you can use, that it's reversible. If we go on to the next slide, we'll see an example. The next slide, pseudonymized data. If we go on to the next slide, please. Yes, so that is data that has been pseudonymized. So my name is John Doe, and the pseudonymized data looks like that. Now, this is reversible. This is a reversible process, and that's why you have a key in the middle to show you that it's a process that you can actually reverse. The unreversible process is anonymization, where the data is actually permanently changed. Personal data is kicked out of the whole process, and personal data that has been anonymized ceases to actually become personal data because the process is irreversible and it's very, very secure, if I may say. Okay, I hope we're still together. Next slide, please. Okay, so one of the things that we can also do to make sure that our data is protected is classify data. Now, remember we talked about having appropriate security controls in place. If you do not classify your data, that means that you will bundle all the data that you have and secure it one way. And yet we know that there's data that is very sensitive, there's data that is not sensitive. So some of the ways we can classify this data, we can call it, it can be public data. This is data that is shared freely with the public. It can be internal only for staff, or it can be confidential data, sensitive data that if compromised could negatively affect operations, or restricted, highly sensitive data that could put the organization at financial or legal risk. Now, if you have classified the data in that way, restricted data will be protected more securely than maybe internal data. So that also helps you determine what kind of appropriate controls for what data, because we know data security is a very expensive venture, so you do not want to spend a lot of money on data that is public, trying to protect it. And then you also have to justify to your management or board as to why you need certain security measures. So it's very good to classify data and apportion protection according to the risk that the data poses. The other control that we can use is encryption. You have a plain text that is turned into cipher text, and we know that public key infrastructure is a very, very good way of protecting data. So you have plain text turned into cipher text and then turned back into plain text after it has, been delivered or is due for use. The other controls that we have, very, very important controls to note, are what we call access controls. Now, these are very, very important in making sure that we ensure that confidentiality of that data that we protect. So I like to say we need to consider the 6 whys of this access. What do you need access to? Why do you need access to it? Who needs access to it? Where, how, and when. So this will help us determine the kind of access that we are giving to various individuals. So you don't expect to find in an organization everyone having administrator access to servers, to data, to databases, things like that, or everyone being a super user in a database. So this guide will help us determine and give access the right way. And then one key mistake that we make as we give access control is we use generic accounts. So you walk into an organization and every administrator uses the admin account. So at any one point, you actually don't know who's logged into what particular server. So you have 6 administrators and they're all using administrator accounts. So auditing becomes difficult and it's not going to work. Then a very key thing that we should adopt is multi-factor authentication. So you're looking at what you know. This is usually the password. What you have, if you have a card, if you have a phone, where your OTP is sent, and who you are. That's if you're using biometric, your finger, your iris, or your thumbprint, one of the 2. That's very, very important to implement for very sensitive data. I know most of us are using multi-factor authentication for our banking applications and also for most of the Gmail that we use. And I'd recommend that you actually enable multi-factor authentication for all your social media accounts, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, because you do not want your identity to be hijacked. Okay, and then password configurations. Simple passwords, simple passwords, simple passwords are, and no, 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 okay? I usually like to say, please use a passphrase. Do not just say Kampala. Put a sentence in it. I know Ron, you'll say, oh, I'm the coolest, person around. Just the longer, the better. And add some difficult letters in there. Put an exclamation mark somewhere. Put a hashtag somewhere. Put a percentage somewhere, but just make it long and easy for you to remember, okay? So that's password, very, very important, and do not use the same password across your many accounts. Do not use the same password on Instagram, your work email, what else, Facebook, your banking account. That's a no, because if one of those accounts is hacked into, that means the hacker has access to every other account that you have or that you own. Okay, so we go on to the technical mambo jumbo here. And these are technical security measures that you must implement. Now, I like to say that as technical people, as IT people, sometimes we concentrate a lot on the technical security measures. But the technical security measures work to reinforce, remember, the policies, the standards, that I talked about earlier, the training, the user awareness that I talked about earlier. I'll give an example. Imagine you have a state-of-the-art firewall, a state-of-the-art, okay, let me use a simple example. You have built a very beautiful house and you have fenced it all round nicely. In Uganda, we also like to put electric barbed wire, and then you like to put an alarm system, and everything is working perfectly. And so the alarm system is supposed to work in a way that if someone at a certain hour of the night is close to your fence, there's an alarm that goes off and all that. Now imagine the person that set up that whole system had no idea or clue about what they were doing. So instead of setting up the alarm system to work when someone is close to it, they configure everything, and when someone comes close to the wall at probably 3 a.m. in the night, the gate opens, and then the intruders or the thieves come in. So that's the same thing that happens when you have these very nice, sophisticated technical security measures, and you have forgotten to do the skilling, to do the training, to do the awareness. The perfect example is the phishing scams that we see. You have access control systems in your organization, but then the users that you give these passwords to are probably not aware and not trained to notice phishing emails, to notice scams. So a hacker will send an email to one of your users and you know, tell them, oh, click on this, and then you'll win a present or a prize, or would like to talk to you, and include your password or whatever it is that you need to do. And the user will do that. And so the hacker will have access to their password. And with that password, they'll get into your environment and then work to elevate those privileges. Remember when we talked about access control? So if in your organization, to make sure that there's user awareness, there's user training, and there's user skilling. So that aside, that said, there are very key things that we should be doing in our environments, even for our own personal laptops, phones. And one of those things is patch management, or can I say updating, upgrading your devices. It's very, very important. You know why? Because there are known weaknesses in these devices, in these systems that hackers will use to get into those systems. So if those systems have been patched up or have been hardened, we like to say, then it means that you are secure at one point or another. You're very secure. As when I talk about patch management, I think about patching up potholes back here in Kampala, but it's almost the same thing. You make it smooth and you remove all those weaknesses within your systems. Then we have baseline configurations. This is very good for change management. If you're going to do changes on your systems, on your servers, you need to track those changes and you need to know what are you changing from and to. So there must be very good documentation of what is changing. Otherwise, you're going to have security vulnerabilities in your network. Then the very important thing that I'd like to talk about is third-party security management. You must manage your third parties, your vendors in your organizations, people that, you know, give you support in your organization. And then a very important critical component that we need to do is log and monitor our devices. That's after we have put in all these technical security measures. Why? Without logs from your sources, from your applications, from your systems, there is no way you're going to do audits. There is no way you're going to do investigations because you don't have the evidence, you don't have the logs. And when you have security events or incidents without logs, then there is no way you're going to do all these investigations and do lessons learned. So it's important that all your logs are collected and they are stored safely and in a very, very secure manner. And you need to be sure that your administrators actually cannot delete your logs, your sources of logs as well, because that's destroying evidence. And then you need to monitor your IT infrastructure and identify when incidents happen, when data breaches happen, and be able to troubleshoot. One of the requirements of the Data Protection and Privacy Act is that you must report data breaches as soon as they happen, as soon as you are aware of them. So if you're not doing monitoring, if you're not doing investigations, that means you won't be able to comply with that requirement, and that will have financial and legal implications on you as an organization. Okay, and then the other thing that we have in this whole cycle of data, at the end of the life cycle of the data, when you're ready to retire that data, how do you destroy this data? It's very, very imperative that you actually destroy this data in a very secure manner. Those are the various types that you can use to destroy data or to dispose of it, according, remember, to the classifications that we talked about. Remember the public data, the internal, the confidential, and the sensitive data. So if it's sensitive data, you probably want to do a physical destruction. If it's public data, a delete, a format, a wipe will be enough. Okay, so we need to be sure that we're doing this according to the risk that is presented by the data that we hold. And we know that personal data is sensitive data that we need to give the utmost, due care to. Okay, so at the end of this all, the controls that we're looking at are not just for maybe data at rest or data in transit. No, these controls cut across the entire life cycle of the data that you have, of the information that you have. So when we're talking about data protection or data security, our concerns are for the entire life cycle. So from creation to destruction. Why? Because we know that data that is supposed to be destroyed and has not been destroyed is a liability. We call that still data. It becomes a liability because the moment it's accessed, it's hacked into, then you have a liability on you as a company. From the point of planning, how do you plan to collect the minimal data minimization to make sure that you ensure that you meet that obligation or that principle? When you're collecting it, how secure are the devices that you use to collect this data? So you need to look at the device security. You need to make sure that you have consent, you're collecting the data legally and responsibly. And then when you store this data in databases, you're looking at database security, you're looking at access management of this data. And also you're looking at the surrounding environment, the network of where these databases are stored. Then when you look at using and analyzing, that's where the data, the identification comes in. But why you need to re-identify that data, then you need to do it in a proper manner. When you're sharing this data, how are you sharing it? What are the terms of use? What is, how do you treat unauthorized sharing? How do you ensure that unauthorized sharing actually does not happen? Okay, so just to wrap it up, think data security. I think we can just take questions at this point. Think data security and then think the entire life cycle of that data that you have. From the point you collect it to the point you actually destroy it. Okay, so we'll take questions at this point. I don't know if there's a game that I'd like us to play. So if that can show, that would be very good, just to make sure that I wasn't speaking to myself. Yes, thank you. Okay, so as we get the game running, I'd like to ask Ronnie some few questions. He'll be my guinea pig. Okay.
Oh, wow. I hope I was in class, but your game is ready, so you still need to ask me questions?
Yes, I need to be sure that you are paying attention because you asked me a question. So now, do you understand the question you asked me?
Yes, I believe I do. So one seems to be a subset of the other.
Ronnie, let's come back there. Okay, so ladies and gentlemen, on your screen is a number. If you can get your phone, go to kahoot.it. Kahoot.it, Kahoot.it, and then enter
Punch
that
that number.
code. Ronnie, why don't you punch in for me?
All right,
just to
so
make sure that you know you're in class.
Kahoot is a simple game, and I think she's prepared some questions just to find out how much attention you are paying during her session. So go to the Kahoot website, and that's www.kahoot.it. Hopefully you're doing this on a laptop, and you need a second device, either another laptop or a phone, and then punch in that number, and we're going to start the Kahoot in just a bit. I can see Ezra has joined, Muhammad has joined.
Dixon has joined.
Yeah, give me the Kahoot screen. Yes, I see Dixon, Ezra, Muhammad K. Would like to see a few more members joining Kahoot. And all right. As members join, I see somebody called Rolex. That must be a Ugandan, and it's not the watch, just making me a bit hungry. So let me ask you a question. I've learned so much, you know, data security, data privacy, data accuracy, and I need to go and check that all my data is accurate
Yes,
before they give me the wrong
to-
age, and I
Yes.
reach there and I don't qualify for a job or something like that.
Pension, eh?
But based on unauthorized sharing, what do you advise for a person like me to do, or for men who are out there to guard against wives who come snooping on your data on the phone? Do we ask the 5 W's of data access and privacy? Do we do multi-factor authentication? Because I've seen some men swiping, they even add a toe just to open the phone. So what is your advice on snooping wives? Or are you one of them and you're not willing to divulge information?
Randy, I think you are trapping me here.
I'm sure the men on this call want to know, you know, what is the best method to keep your data secure and safe from snooping wives. If you're with me, wives, feel free to do that. And as soon as we have 5, we'll be ready for her to answer. But how many do we have on Kahoot? So that we can try out the game. So I can see more people are joining. Backspace, John, I see you.
So the number is 9609848. If someone can put it in the chat, that would be very helpful.
Yes. Admin, please put the Kahoot number in the chat for those who are having challenges. 9609848. Yes, somebody has put it there. The website is www.kahoot. Kahoot is spelled KAHOOT.IT. And you do that on a different platform.
I think we can start the game, eh?
All right. Looks like we have enough quorum.
Yeah.
All right. I guess there we go. So over to you.
Oh, so Ronnie, I think you were the only one asking the other question of snooping wives.
Snooping wives. Is there surely, is
No
it
one
just
else
me?
has.
I'm sure there's 5 members who are going to just type in the chat section and say, yes, please answer the question on data protection from snooping wives on your phone. But I think we're ready for Kahoot now. And we'll just play that game. At least we have a good number. You think you're happy with that number?
Yes.
I see close to a little over 10.
Yes, a little over 10.
Yep.
Representative, I think. Yeah. So, Ronnie, I do think you were alone.
No, but Thomas there says yes. That's
Yes.
one.
Yes
So
to
more,
what? Yes to what?
yes to what I said, that he wants you to answer that question. Thank you so much, Jefferson. I'm waiting for some more yeses, but I think we're ready for the Kahoot.
Yes, we are. It's a very simple game. Very, very simple. But I want to see the winner, the standing ovation. I don't know if you have a present or unwanted witness has a present for the winner.
We'll certainly have something for you.
Cool.
Yeah, I can see Fujitsu says it's ready. I hope
Okay, perfect. So speed matters as well. So we can start. Good.
All right, let's go.
So Ronnie, why would you give your wife suspicion to check your phone? Let's start from there.
No. Just, well, not that there's any suspicion, but she might land on information that might be interpreted otherwise. And as such, it's good to have some protection in place so that you can give her guided access.
So that is where you use multi-factor authentication.
Yeah, I do thumbprint, top print, iris.
Add that there.
And a voice recognition as well.
Yes.
Yeah.
And you're good to go. And you will not have any fights.
Super. Okay. All right, are we ready on Kahoot? If we are, let's roll the ball.
And in the meantime, if there are any questions in the chat, please do share them. We'll take those as well.
All right, and then as far as order of business is concerned, right after this, we have just one last research paper that is going to be shared by someone I'll be introducing a little later. Let's go. The quiz has begun. The options are there. We're waiting on the answers. 3 common controls used to protect the availability of information are, you have 4 options. Super. I can see people in the audience here saying Nzenkatuse, which loosely translates, I got that one right. All right.
Kafrasian is the winner.
Kafrasian is the winner on that one. Are there more questions set up?
Yeah, just 4 more.
4 more. All
Yes.
right. Let's go to the next question. Organizations should protect personal information by which of the following methods? Organizations should protect personal information by which of the following methods? And you have 4. 0 answers. Remember, speed is of the essence.
We can move to the next. Oh, there's one answer.
One answer has come through. Give them some time. These guys are in a short while. All right. Only one person got that one correct. And it is red, which I really can't read from here. It's Kafresian again. Wow. Kafresian in the lead. Ezra and Mohammed, pull up your socks. True or false? All right. How do you pronounce this? Is this phishing? Phishing is only done through email. True or false? 7 answers, 8. Some of you are just doing try and error. You're not too sure. You're like, well, we'll see from there. 9 answers coming through, and we close. The answer is false. Phishing is not only done through email. What else is it done through?
Through phones, through text, through
So there's so
Facebook,
many phishing
yes,
platforms.
yes.
All right, and Kafresian, this time Joseph has come through. Sorry, Kafresian, Joseph followed by Ezra, then Muhammad K. Okay, I think we have 1 or 2 more. How often should you back up your data? How often should you back up your data? Once a month? I can't read the rest from where I am. Once a week? Once a fortnight?
As per your organization's backup policy.
All right, based on your organization's backup policy, and the correct answer is ta-da! Joseph, no. Ezra coming through at the top on this one, followed by Muhammad. And the correct answer was as per your organization's policy, right?
Yes.
And you better pray to God that your organization has the right policy. Okay, is there any other question? This is the last question. Which of these is not a wise idea when it comes to password security? Those of you just put your birthday. All right.
Name.
Which of these is not a wise idea when it comes to password security? You have 4 options. Based on the font size from where I am, I can't read, but the correct answer is blue. And what does that say?
Right, you shouldn't write your passwords down on sticky notes and put them somewhere.
Don't write your password on a sticky note and keep it in your wallet together with your phone.
And the winner is?
And the winner is, ladies and gentlemen, who got 3 out of the 5 questions, Ezra. Ezra, Bugalo. Round of applause for Ezra. Can I see some virtual applause, some hand claps? But special shouts out to number 2, Mohammed K. And in 3rd place was Joseph. Kafresian started with gas, but along the way things changed. It's not how you start a matter, but how you finish that really matters. But Angela, I want to say a big thank you. I think this has been absolutely informative, and I can see some people are not sour winners, but Mohammed, they are saying well played. I missed the first question. His data was still disturbing him. I don't know. But thank you so much, and I hope based on how people have performed, you're happy that they have understood your session. Any parting shots from you?
Yes, my parting shots is to make sure what was I going to say as parting shots?
I don't know.
I was going to start from your question.
All right.
But really to make sure that as users of this data, we take our own data security personally. So it's up to us to make sure that we protect our data. Like Ronnie was asking, how do I protect my phone? But it's not just, from your spouse, but from everyone else. So you need to know how to protect your data. And because we use a lot of passwords, so I always think use a long password, use a passphrase. Do not use, a small password. Do not share your passwords. Do not use the same password on all your online accounts. Enable multi-factor authentication. So that's what I leave with you today. And remember that as a data user, as a data subject, you actually have the right to make sure that your data is being collected in the rightful manner, but also protected by those organizations that collect it in the rightful way. So have a great evening. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Angela. I mean, personally, I'm going to go back and revisit my passwords because I erroneously thought to myself, I just need one password so that I don't forget it, you know. And I have something similar across the board. And I hope bad people are not listening right now. I'm going to change them right after we come back from the band. The band is going to give us a small music interlude. Grab yourself a cup of coffee, some water. And when we return, we have our last presentation, which is on a research paper that I think you'll be excited to listen in on. So, Titanic Band led by Lala. What's the name of this song?
Toddy.
Toddy, all the way from Zimbabwe, if I'm not mistaken. Oliver Mtukudzi. Yes. Over to you, Lala.
Oh, Toddy. What's how we do since the dawn?
What shall we do?
Oh, Toddy, what's how we do since the dawn?
What shall we do?
Oh, Toddy, what's how we do since the dawn?
What shall we do?
Jina ranza se kurenera rufumu mawoko. Hallelujah, mutachiwana. Jina ranza se kurenera rufumu mawoko. Easy we punu na what's how we do since the time.
What shall we do?
Oh, Toddy, what's how we do since the time.
What shall we do?
Kuna kule mane mama moja pererwa
Tachiwana Wani wina Tachiwana
Selve kuna kule na moja pererwa
Tachiwana Wani wina Tachiwana
Selve kuna kule mane mama moja pererwa
Tachiwana Wani wina
Oh, Toddy, what's how we do since the time?
What shall we do?
Oh, Toddy, what shall we do since the time?
What shall we do?
Kaviri nzene nyuma azitera kugolola ngolote ko bagizere miura jafere yatorego yengeregeze nazina byekolero abizandalo kumanyu nabicheko nakwesunga ndanga tutali amapira leta mama wo nakati kwetekekede nakunena kagata Bobby be my love. Ay, 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 ay. We're naughty, naughty, naughty. Ba-ba-ba. Please be my lover. Oh, 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 oh. Nasindi como vaca, na kumwara. Orenzo nyinyi amu mwana go na sombo mpira munkuba mugongo Sitawera bina yebyaluli nakunanyogera nonyegera ebisigandi byali moluyi engolo ensambagire emama o nakwesungadde nga tikyali amapiira neta mama wo nakati bwetegegedde nafunyire akagato wenawe nakinawe Bobby, be my lover.
Come on.
Yeah. When naughty, please be my lover. Yeah. Oh, lo, lo, lo. Oh, lo, lo, lo. Oh, lo, 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 lo. Yeah. Naughty, please be my lover. Yeah. Oh, lo, 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 yeah. Oh, lo, 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 yeah. Mama, yeah. Yeah.
I've been thinking in the rain, Jabulani. I'll be holding hands with you, Jabulani, Jabulani. The people sing and dance, Jabulani. There's always just a chance, Jabulani, for you to find romance, Jabulani. You've been dancing on a lawn, Jabulani. You have made us feel so strong, Jabulani. Jabulani, the people sing and dance, Jabulani. There's always just a chance, Jabulani, for you to find romance, Jabulani. Yes, you can sing and dance, laugh and feel, Jabulani. Jabu. Say you can sing and dance, laugh and feel, Jabulani. Jabulani. Jabulani, the people sing and dance, Jabulani. There's always just a chance, Jabulani, for you to find romance, Jabulani. I say we can sing and dance, laugh and feel, Jabulani. Jabu. Yes, we can sing and dance and laugh and feel,
Jabulani. Beautiful. Thank you so much, Titanic Band, our resident band here at the 3rd Privacy Symposium Africa. Jabulani, I believe, by PJ Powers. Just before that was one from Uganda, Nachi, by Kenneth Mugabe. Really a song about
a lover who has failed to give him access to her heart. She needs multi-factor authentication and so many passwords, and he's lamenting in that song. And I think the first one from Oliver Mtukutsi, Toddy, if I got that one right, all the way from Zimbabwe. Shouts out to all of you from Zimbabwe that are tuned in. And again, we'd just like to thank our sponsors. Of course, the Ministry of ICT and National Guidance. Thank you so much. Couldn't have done this without you. Katende, Sempewa Advocates, Privacy Scorecard, PI, Data Protection Network, Media Network, NITA Uganda, and of course the Digital Human Rights Lab. Thank you, thank you, thank you so much. And thank you to all of you who, registered online and have been a part of this discussion since we started. Well, we're about getting ready to bring this to a wrap, and we just have one more presenter with a research paper that she has done. And this paper is really about, I don't know if you've ever had that feeling, that you're being watched. Maybe while you're in your house or you're taking a shower or something, and you feel like there are eyes all over you, like Big Brother is watching. Well, the paper she's actually going to do is titled, Big Brother is Stalking You. And you need to put in the effect, Big Brother is stalking you. Your surveillance by intelligence and law enforcement agencies in Africa. And to present this paper, which she has researched on, all the way from Germany, we have Dr. Patricia Boshe, and she's a senior researcher at the Research Center for Law and Digitization at the University of Passau in Germany. But she has a long CV. She's not only from Germany, has done work in Tanzania and different parts of Africa, and she's a data privacy trainer and consultant. She's also a co-founder and co-director of the African Law and Technical Institute, a research institute focusing on the interrelation between law, technology, and society from an interdisciplinary perspective. And I could tell you so much more, but she comes with a wealth of experience, 10 years experience as a law lecturer in Tanzania, to mention but a few. And I can already see her live. Patricia, do you just want to unmute your mic and say hello so we know you are loud and clear? All right.
Can you hear me?
Do we hear Patricia loud and clear? All right. All right. I understand we do. So, Patricia, over to you as you take us through this research paper. Indeed, many of us do feel like Big Brother is watching. Over to you, Patricia.
Thank you, moderator. I would like to start by saying I'm very delighted to be part of this symposium and have an opportunity to present my paper on surveillance by intelligence and law enforcement agencies. Basically because this is an area of law that has a lot of critical and controversial data processing activities, but nevertheless lacks proper regulations in terms of proper privacy and data protection, or at least in Africa. Can I have the next slide, please? I cannot see the slide. Okay. Of course, we know surveillance is very encroaching in privacy and uses a lot of personal data. And yes, of course, surveillance is very necessary in a democratic society because it's used to control and guarantee public safety, national security, and also balances other rights of individual. Next slide, please. It is surveillance is necessary, but I call it a necessary evil because of its necessity. And you can see why it is necessary, because it is a norm in constitution that a lot of human rights, including the right to privacy, will receive an exclusion when it comes to processing of personal data, or when it comes to surveillance, when it comes to law enforcement. There you'll find constitutions in different countries will provide derogation to the right to privacy. You will also find in data protection laws that processing by law enforcement agencies or intelligence agencies receive exceptions or exclusion from the rules of data protection laws, because it is necessary for them to in certain contexts in order to provide public safety, in order to ensure national security, in order to ensure that the criminal justice system functions properly, and in order to ensure that the judicial organs are able to discharge their functions properly as well. And so you find in most cases, first of all, from the constitutional point of view, that privacy of an individual will be sort of allowed to be encroached in these contexts in order to promote these aspects, such as public safety, national security, criminal justice enforcement, and judicial functions, as well as other rights of other people involved. Next slide. The previous slide, please. Yes, but the problem is, I think the law enforcement agencies or intelligence agencies are missing the point. The fact that the constitutions derogates or data protection law exclude the processing of personal information when it comes to intelligence or criminal law enforcement activities does not mean that this is a suspension of the rule of law or is the death of privacy. No, it is only suspended or excluded from this context in order to uphold other rights, in order to promote what is important in a democratic society. But still, there are rules and conditions that probably should still apply and bind these agencies when conducting surveillance activities. Next, please. For example, in the context of EU, for example, we have the GDPR, that is the General Data Protection Regulation, and that is the law or the regulation that guides and provide for protection of personal information. And it also provides for exclusions or exemptions in the process of personal information when it comes to law enforcement agencies, including intelligence agencies and criminal law enforcement. But there is another directive which also came into force the same time that the GDPR came into force. And this is a directive with regards to the processing of personal data by competent authorities for the purposes of prevention, investigation, detection, or prosecution of criminal offenses, or the execution of criminal penalties, and on their free movement of the data that is processed by these agencies. Next, please. In Africa, unfortunately, we have the Malabo Convention that also has one of the parts provide for a framework for data protection, but we do not have a separate instrument or separate convention that provides for the protection of personal information, protection of privacy in the context of surveillance or in the context of processing of personal information by law enforcement agencies or intelligence agencies. But fortunately, we have the Declaration of Principles on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information, which came in force, which was adopted by African Union Commission in 2017, which also acknowledges that surveillance is necessary, but must be regulated to ensure individual privacy is not unnecessarily or arbitrarily infringed. Next slide, please. So Article 41 of the Declaration provide for what are those, or what is an ideal framework to regulate, or an ideal framework to ensure that privacy and personal data is protected, even when processed in the context of law enforcement, in the context of criminal enforcement activities. First, the the framework that is created under Article 41 of this declaration is that, first of all, these activities should not be ordered from the blue. There should be a law that provides for these activities, a specific law that gives powers to either intelligence agencies or law enforcement agencies to process certain data, or to collect information, to surveil subjects in certain contexts. And second of all, these surveillance activities, once provided in a legislation, must be specific, must be specified to either a certain, what specific information is required for a certain or for that specific, if it's an investigation, for that specific investigation. So any surveillance should be specific to that subject, the subject of the investigation, and to that data or such information that is required for that investigation. And thirdly, it should not just be conducted out of nowhere, but it should be based on a reasonable suspicion of a crime. If not a crime, it should be conducted on a legitimate aim, such as promotion of national security or public safety. Next. Next slide, okay. And the fourth requirement is that the surveillance, once the three requirements are met, surveillance provide for adequate safeguard in the processing activities, in the surveillance activities, and the safeguards that have been mentioned in the declaration, there are 6 of them. The first safeguard is prior authorization. Before any surveillance activity can start, before any surveillance can be made on a person, on a subject, that agency or an officer, investigation officer, must acquire either a warrant or an order of a court, an independent and impartial judicial body that allows that person, that officer, to conduct such surveillance. And second, there must be due process to safeguard the overall process in surveillance. It should not only be conducted without having safeguards in place, without having proper process to guide the officer on what should be collected, how it should be collected, whom this is, example, a warrant or order or surveillance order should be addressed, there should be proper and due process that safeguard the surveillance. And the third one is the scope of the surveillance. The authorization, or whether it's a warrant or an order of the judicial body, should also provide for the scope of the surveillance, the time, when shall the surveillance start, the material, what kind of information are covered within the surveillance order, subjects, persons who are covered within the surveillance order, manner and place to be surveillance. Manner, which, for example, which techniques or which mode of surveillance will be employed. A place to be surveilled, for example, are you going to surveil communication? And if you are going to surveil communication of this person, are you going to surveil communication using communication providers by installing, for example, monitoring and surveilling devices? Are you going to surveil this person by stalking them, following them? Are you going to survey them by tapping their houses with recording devices? All these things should be specified in the warrant or the order of the judicial body. There should also be a notification. So notification usually, because in most cases when an officer applies for an order or a warrant to surveil, because of the nature of this warrant, these applications are usually ex parte. And so the subjects to be surveilled, it will not be involved in these applications. So they will not know that there's an application that has been made to request that they be surveilled. And so they are unaware of these activities. And so the declaration proposes that, and this is not only in the declaration, you will see later on, this is something that has been accepted. It's something that is sort of a standard in frameworks that allow surveillance in this context. So notification is to allow that the data subject or person who is being surveilled later on to know that their data had been used or had been processed and for what purposes. And in case that the data was processed or was used or was released without any legal basis, then this person can have an opportunity to challenge these surveillance activities. And usually notification comes post activities, post the surveillance measures. And so this will allow, first of all, the officers to conduct the activities without, for example, investigation being disrupted. But secondly, will allow the data subject or person who is being surveilled to be able to either challenge if the surveillance measures were illegitimate or were conducted beyond what was required by the warrant or the court order, and then be able to seek redress. And the fifth aspect is transparency, that the declaration sees that it is necessary for surveillance measures to be transparent, to be conducted in a transparent manner. The nature and the scope of the processing activities, the processing of personal data should be in a transparent manner. Not that the officers should inform the public that we are now surveilling so and so subject, but the law that provide, or the law that empower the officers to conduct these surveillance activities should provide for a system, for a mechanism that will allow the public to be able to know what are the mandates of these police officers or intelligence agencies when it comes to if they have to invoke surveillance, the surveillance powers. And the last aspect in the adequate safeguard is independent and effective oversight, which is also missing in most of the frameworks, both data protection frameworks and surveillance frameworks in Africa. So independent and effective oversight most of the time is confused or is sort of exchanged with the prior authorization. Prior authorization and independent and effective oversight are two different things. Prior authorization gives the officer a mandate or a go-on to start the surveillance activities. But independent and effective oversight is a body or a person that will look and will sort of not control, but look over the activities that are conducted by the officers to make sure that all other aspects, all other requirements or regulations are there too when surveillance measures are in place, to make sure that the officers are accountable for their actions, to make sure that the surveillance is conducted within the law or within the legal parameters. The next slide, please. So I did an overview of 5 countries in Africa, which within these countries, all of the countries, that is Algeria, Egypt, Namibia, Nigeria, and Uganda, they have the right to privacy in their constitutions, and the right to privacy that guarantees confidentiality of correspondence and communication. Both of these, all of these 5 countries have that right in their constitutions. Next slide. I would like you to keep in mind what I spoke about, the blueprint that has been provided by the declaration on what is an ideal framework, or what is an ideal regulation or that should be when surveillance measures are imposed. When I go through this constitutional blueprint for surveillance, the first thing that is also recommended by the declaration is that all surveillance measures should not be arbitrary or should not be ordered from a person or executive or any other body, but should be legislated, should be provided by a law. A certain law should give these agencies the mandate to surveil individuals. So within these 5 constitutions, within these countries, it's only in Uganda that the constitution does not say specifically that the derogation of the right to privacy should be provided by a law. But Algeria, Egypt, Namibia, and Nigeria constitutions, they all state specifically that derogation of the right to privacy should be provided by a law, and that law should contain rules and regulation on how such surveillance measure or such derogation should be conducted. Within the constitutions, again, you find the context of these surveillance measures or the context of these derogations. So the nature is, in Algeria, for example, the constitution says that when the right to privacy has to be derogated, such measure shall not prejudice the essence of the rights and freedoms. So although the right to privacy is derogated, although a person is deprived of his right to privacy, the essence of the right should not be deprived. And that's this point takes us back to the point that I raised before on the that was provided in the declaration on the notification, that although the right to privacy can be derogated, can be deprived, but the person should have a right, should have an opportunity invaded arbitrarily or without legal basis. Egypt has the same measure or the same idea of what is the limit when it comes to depriving the right to privacy. It says the measure shall not infringe the essence of the rights and their foundation, and must be done in a manner that is prescribed in the law. Namibia says, in the Namibia constitution, is that the measure must be necessary in a democratic society and in the interest of national security and public safety. Nigeria constitution says the measure must be reasonable and justifiable in a democratic society. And Uganda's constitution says measure must be reasonably justifiable in a free democratic society. So you will see the idea here is not to give law enforcement agencies or to give intelligence agencies, by giving them the derogation or by excluding these processing activities from the data protection laws. The idea is not giving them an utmost power to surveil people whenever there's a need or they feel the need to surveil people. There has to be a reason, there has to be a yardstick to say, now we are allowed to surveil people, now we are allowed to follow people, because the yardstick here is to promote the democratic societies, and not to threaten people or not to stalk people and to sort of try to shut them up because they're doing something that maybe a political person is not happy with it. But that measure, any surveillance measure, shall not prejudice the essence of the right and shall be done as a measure to promote a democratic society and not otherwise. And in all the constitutions, on the 3 constitutions, requires that, as it is proposed in the declaration, that any of these surveillance measures must, if a surveillance measure must be imposed, there has to be an oversight. And Algeria and Egypt require that the oversight must be a judicial authority. In Namibia, an oversight can be a competent judicial officer. Nigeria and Uganda does not mention the fact of oversight. And lastly is that the Constitution also recognizes the need to have individual redress mechanism. And in all 5 constitutions, an individual has a right to bring an action before the court whenever their right to privacy or any other right has been infringed, including by surveillance measures. The next slide, please. I also looked into surveillance laws within these countries, and unfortunately, I cannot present all of them here because there's a lot of patchworks, and most of these laws you'll find what is common is that in all of these countries, all communication laws provide for a very extremely, a very intrusive ability, give the law enforcement agencies ability to very intrusively invade into people's privacy and collect bulky information. And apart from that, you find there are other laws that also provide or also gives the law enforcement agencies and intelligence agencies powers to surveil. Such laws will be, which are common, will include anti-terrorism law, cybersecurity law. Those kinds of laws, they all have surveillance, they all give surveillance powers to intelligence agencies, and they all have different measures and different standards. And so it's not easy to say this country has adhered to their constitutional blueprint of what surveillance measures should be like, because all these other laws provide different powers and provide different conditions and standards when it comes to surveillance activities done from different, done by intelligence or law enforcement agencies using different laws under one roof. And so the monitoring center under RICA is responsible for all monitoring activities in Uganda. And so, for example, if a police officer is conducting surveillance activities under the, let's say, anti-terrorism law, we'll have to bring the warrant or bring the court order to the monitoring center, and the monitoring center will conduct the surveillance on behalf of this police officer. And then after they collected the required information as stipulated in the order or in the warrant, will transfer such data to the officer. And so this idea of centralizing surveillance activities is there. They've tried, but still, for example, in case of Uganda, although they've centralized surveillance activities, still the Anti-Terrorism Act has its own separate surveillance framework, which is not bound by the surveillance framework that is established by RICA. And so still you see there are multiple laws with multiple, it gives the agencies multiple powers. And at the end of the day, it's not easy to say now my right has been have been illegally invaded or arbitrarily invaded because you do not know which law applies. There are a lot of them. The other thing that I realized or I discovered is that these laws promote indiscriminate and bulky surveillance in a lot of bulky surveillance in data protection, especially communication laws and cybersecurity laws. They allow police officers or intelligence agencies to install monitoring and surveillance devices to telecommunication providers. And so it is not, I cannot imagine being able to conduct a discriminate surveillance when you have a surveillance or monitoring device installed. Because when you install a monitoring device in a telecommunication, in a communication plant or in a communication by a technological communication provider, it's not easy to say, okay, now I want only to collect data relating to subject A or related to subject B, because data is flowing, communication is flowing, and these devices records information as it comes, records information as it goes. So it collects all data that is tapped to be collected without discriminating a person, without discriminating type of data that, for example, if you need only data for certain purpose, it will not discriminate that kind of data that you need for that purpose. So they promote indiscriminate and bulky surveillance and data collection. They also allow for arbitrary surveillance. For example, we've seen in the declaration and also in the constitutions that before any surveillance measure can be implemented, it has to be provided by a law. A law should give these agencies the power to collect such information. The law should also provide conditions and circumstances where such surveillance measures can be implemented. But, for example, when you look at Nigeria, the law allows surveillance activities to be conducted even by order from a federal agency without being provided by a law. So a federal agency can order surveillance without saying this surveillance is conducted, for example, under cybersecurity law, or this surveillance, I'm ordering you to conduct this surveillance under anti-terrorism law. They can just say, I'm ordering surveillance of subject A, B, and C. Also, for example, in Uganda, communication law also allows an officer, although the law says an officer has to get a warrant, and the warrant has to say, to provide for the scope of surveillance. But at the end of the law provided a controversial provision that says an officer is permitted to surveil, to go beyond the permitted surveillance if they can justify this later. And the law also says that when an officer goes beyond the permitted surveillance, he can also use this information collected beyond the permitted surveillance before the court. So this evidence is acceptable before the court. So that means permitted to do, and that whatever he collects can be admitted and can be accepted as an evidence in the court of law. And all of the laws that I've seen, the surveillance law have no provisions on transparency and notification, and have no provisions on individual redress mechanism, except in Namibia. Next, please. Next slide, please. Thank you. So from what I've read, from what I've seen, is that the Constitution basically provides for a groundwork, provides for a blueprint. And when we also read that the declaration, the Declaration of Freedom of Expression, also provide us with a blueprint, with what is required, what surveillance framework should look like, which we do not have in Africa at the moment. And so from there, I came to this consideration. First of all, to be able to at least have an oversight over the surveillance activities in Africa until such time that we have a proper regulation of these activities, data protection law could grant data protection authorities a surveillance oversight within their data protection laws. And this is possible because, for example, if you look at Namibia Data Protection Bill, it has provided, or it has granted the data protection authority with the ability or with powers to oversight, although these activities are excluded from the application of the data protection law to some extent, but the data protection authority still has power to oversight or to look or to sort of supervise these surveillance activities, to be able to determine whether surveillance activities are conducted in a manner that does not necessarily or arbitrarily infringe on individual right to privacy and data protection. The next consideration will be to adopt an instrument to harmonize these scattered surveillance laws in Africa. We could have a directive like the one that was adopted in the EU, or we could have a different approach, but still the objective should be to harmonize these scattered laws on surveillance. And whatever instruments that is adopted or whatever approach that is taken, I think the best considerations should be on best information practices in the context of surveillance. The instrument should also provide guidelines on data access and usage in the context of surveillance, due process rules. It should also regulate the use or the installing of monitoring devices, because I cannot say, because I'm not a police officer, I cannot say if it's possible to surveil people without installing monitoring devices, but still, if it is necessary to have these devices installed to conduct surveillance for public safety or national security, then it is necessary to have a regulation. It's necessary to have rules and guidelines on how to use these monitoring devices, these installed monitoring devices, in a way that individual privacy and data protection rights are not necessarily or arbitrarily infringed. With this, I would like to thank you all for listening, and if you have any other question, I'll be happy to answer. Thank you.
All right. I think round of applause for Dr. Patricia. Thank you so much. A wonderful job that you've done there with that research paper. And just to remind you again, Big Brother is talking you. Surveillance by intelligence and law enforcement agencies in Africa. I think in a nutshell, what I picked from your presentation is that when it comes to surveillance, the discretion should not be left to intelligence and enforcement officers, or agencies. Because then abuse is certainly bound to happen. So Dr. Patricia's presentation will be made available for all of you. If you have any personal question or something from her presentation, I believe she's still with us for a few minutes, and you can put that in the chat room, and you'll get a personal response from Dr. Patricia. Thank you so much, Patricia, one more time for very ably presenting that paper. Thank you. All right. And if that's okay, ladies and gentlemen, all good things come to an end. This is certainly one of those. But just to give you a quick insight, sneak preview to what to expect tomorrow. All right. Tomorrow we'll be having a workshop on valid consent, and someone will be presenting that paper. We also have two panels. One of the panels is on the effects of COVID-19. Testing and vaccination to privacy. What has the effects of all of that been? And the last panel discussion will be on national identification systems, national ID systems, the safety of personal data, and the right to privacy. And last but not least, of course, this will happen on the last day, the privacy scorecard, which we're going to see how different stakeholders have performed, and that will be unveiled on Friday. But for now, Ronnie Abasa is my name. Been honored to be your host, and you're welcome to stay in the chat room if you still have some questions or some interaction. But to bring this all to an end, let's put our hands together for a wonderful band who I think have done a splendid job. Lala, what's the name of this song you're going to do?
I Love You, Africa.
I Love You, Africa. Before you log out, turn the volume up, crank it up, and let's dance to this tune together. You're welcome to leave at will. Let's go.
I'll pray all the people, all in this land. I will hold them close to me. Together one day I'll be sweet harmony. Let's be patient peacefully. in Africa. All I need is here in Africa. In Africa. All I need is right here in Africa. And I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, yeah. I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I I love you, yeah. Woo! I will always pray for all these people learn. I will hold them close to me, yeah. Together one day I'll be sweet harmony. Let's be patient peacefully. Konde lukone kusemu in Africa. All I need is right here in Africa. Konde lukone kusemu in Africa. All I need is right here in Africa. And I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, yeah. Oh, I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, yeah. Yeah. Oh, no, no, no. I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, yeah. Oh, I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, Africa. I love you, yeah.
Omukwana was a sachigi. Omutima guno wakufa mukwano sitapu watigi. Mbuwe wandaba isopte nikiki. Mbu it is me, boy, you way I want to give. I like your hips and if you come on till I give. La bala bala ba mukwano, you are laughing. My money I was spending. Kukulila mu chips na shisha mukwano, you way I eating. Don't you know I am Odaigi? Rakubato biraba. You want me, we are fitting. Hello, hello, baby. Mukwana tonziza muchalo, muchalo, nzagabatialo. Hello, baby. Mukwana kwate simu, kusaba kwate simu. Olwalelo tebuche, empale biraka biraka. Ombikuza malala, boronoko berera. Ogezanga nodeka, nze sisobola kukuleka. Wanyake byange nze nondeka wanongange futa. Baby wanyake byange nze nondeka wanongange futa. She told me she don't love me cause I'm loco. In my life you tired of bimbo. And can I believe it, boy? Kuba muzifoto. Wana kwina kutamira, ngomenge kwa tonto. Hello, hello, baby. Mukwana tonziza muchalo, muchalo. Yenzaga matialo. Hello, baby. Mukwana kwate simu, kusaba kwate simu.
Tweyanze, walalala bakutema bamongere. Tweyanze, walalala bakutema bamongere. Tweyanze, walalala bakutema bamongere. Mama tweyanze, walalala bakutema bamongere. Africa tweyanze, walalala bakutema bamongere. Thank you for watching. Oh, we love you so much. Oh, thank you for supporting. Puyo. Walala kakuta mama moge na bulagala. Gona wewe. Walala kakuta mama moge na bulagala. Ololo ololo. Yeah. Ololo ololo. Yeah. Ololo ololo. Ololo mubinga zara kalima. Kaya nilizana lakini. Ololo. Yeah. Yeah. Ololo ololo. Ololo mubinga zara kalima. Yeah, thank you so much.
Womukwano this very day. Give me your heart, don't close the gate. Zegova don't onya jubilate. I want your heart, so me won't debate. Baby boy, don't you delay. Jango mukuwe no more sweating. Jagala kula gema magike. When you move your child, you can relate. 22 pa 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 te. Pa 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 te. Pa 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 te. Pa 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 te.
22 party, to party, 22 party. Together, together, together.
Jagala kukakase, olwalelo sostede. Ela kankubulire, tibiona biona sostede. Stede. Obitade mu os, unkuagala mu senta. Ebyo byomanyine. Twende tunyumire.
Papa papa party,
twende tu party,
papa party,
twende tu party, twende tu nyumire, tugende tunyumire, tugende tunyumire, tugende tunyumire,
papa party.